How to get answers from scriptures. I used to think when people would say, oh, you can find all the answers to life's questions in the scriptures, that they meant that the words would actually tell you exactly the answer to something. Then I started thinking, what about math equations and science things that you just can't really have the words for in scriptures? At least not, like 2 times 7. Is it going to say 2 times 7 is 14? Well, so I now understand scripture so much better, and I'd like to outline for you how I think that we are supposed to be receiving answers through the scriptures from the Lord. So, first of all, as you're reading, let's just say you're pulling out a chapter of scripture and you're reading it, and what is being said? This is the most straightforward way to get an answer, is that you're getting an answer. The Lord saith, do this. And there you are, and you're like, oh, I got it. My brother-in-law was trying to decide if he should build a house or something like that, and it said something about build a house unto the Lord or something. He's like, oh, that means I should build a house. So straightforward words. Now, not so straightforward is what is the spirit that is being said. The spirit. So you might be reading words, but the spirit of it is in one way, and you're asking a question. Oh, and I should preface this all by saying you have something in mind that you want an answer for. So you're trying to find an answer for something. And what is the spirit of the thing you're feeling? Sometimes I feel shy about doing something, putting myself out there, being vulnerable like I am right now. And I get the answer as I'm reading along. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. I'm like, oh, okay. I'll stop being so worried about being embarrassed and vulnerable and do this. Sometimes the spirit of the scripture or the words of the scripture is nothing. So you're sitting there and you're reading and you're like, I'm not getting anything. That might mean that you need to rethink whatever it is that you're trying to get an answer for. It's an answer of no. It's an answer of you don't have it right yet, ask a different question, or ask again later. The timing might be wrong. There might be your spirit tapping into God's spirit relaying something. As you're listening to something, is your spirit tapping into God's spirit as you're reading the scripture? Is it making sense to your spirit, even if it doesn't make sense to your mind? God's spirit tapping into yours, which I think is probably the most way that I get answers, is through my feeling through something and saying, does this feel right? I feel God's spirit right now, and my spirit is feeling better, and like I am receiving an answer for something. So that's probably the most often, and maybe it's because I'm in the right place seeking after God's words for me. They say that prayer is your speaking to God, and scriptures is God speaking back to you. So I think that is often the case. Not always, because sometimes you can just get an answer in your brain just walking through your normal day, and you don't have the scriptures in front of you. And so that can be one way. Another time that you might be able to get answers is through a single word. And quite often I will have that happen where I'm asking for something and I will get one word of the whole thing. And it may just be that one little simple word that doesn't even have anything to do with what I'm praying for, but it was the answer. For example, I had been blessed with 4 wonderful children. Yet I grew up in a house of 8 children, and I loved the circus. I loved the loudness and the fun that my family had, and I wanted to have more than 4 children. But the Lord had different plans for me. So as I was reading through my scriptures, it said, the Lord didn't see fit that he should take this people out of bondage. And see fit just jumped out. And the answer to me was, the Lord doesn't see fit that you have any more children. Really? Okay, so I just got to love and enjoy the 4 that I have, which I do. And the Lord knows me well enough to know that I probably couldn't have handled more than 4. 4 was plenty. 4 is great. So I'm so grateful for my 4 children that God did not see fit to bless me with any more. Have you ever had that happen where just one word, or I guess that was 2 words, answers your question? You might be reading through, and this often happens to me, reading through the scriptures, and you're reading one thing, but you're thinking of another. And I'm not talking about what we're going to have for dinner or thinking about that movie from last night, though that could be an answer. Oftentimes, they're parallel. You are thinking of something and reading something, and they're kind of knocking back and forth, and you're getting an answer from it. And you may not even realize, because it just feels like it's just your thoughts just kind of wandering. But I think that's how the Spirit speaks too, is in those wandering answers where you're just kind of musing over it, you're pondering over it, right? And that's how the Lord can insert those little sneaky thoughts into it as you're reading the one thing in the scriptures, and all of a sudden you have an idea, I'm going to do this thing. And it had nothing to do with what you were reading, but you were doing this parallel action that helped God to slip something into there so that you could be able to have an answer. For example, one time I was reading along, it had nothing to do with anything, and I was concerned about my son at the time. And all of a sudden I just got this nice feeling, your son's going to be fine. And I'm thinking, is that me? But I'm reading the scriptures, so I'm going to accept that as a yes. That is a good, uplifting feeling that I'm going to stick with. So to me, that was an answer. So are you getting a good feeling while you're reading the scriptures? Are you getting a stupor of thought? That stupor of thought would be like, maybe you should rethink this. Or it's like a no. And you're thinking, something's weird. I just can't keep my mind focused on this thing. I keep jumping off. That would oftentimes be a no answer for something. Do you feel enlightened? Like, this feels like I'm a better person when I think about this thing as I'm reading the scriptures. Sometimes it's kind of a answer of, you need to research more. You still need more information. And those are the ones that kind of get me, because I think I've done a lot of research and pondering, and it's still like, you haven't done enough. You need to reach out to the resources that I'm giving you, or to the resources that are just around you, find out more, and then come back. And then ultimately, the feeling of peace. Am I feeling peace as I'm reading the scripture about whatever thing I'm praying about or thinking about? Peace to me is the ultimate answer for anything in the scriptures. And sometimes it's just peace of, you're doing this fine. Just keep doing what you're doing. Sometimes it's a piece of, yes, change whatever that thing is. So kind of trying to figure out those peaceful answers and what they mean to you. Now, this one's a little weird. Coincidences. First of all, that words will line up. Like, let's say I just read about someone saying, oh, whenever I'm having a hard day, I get on my bike and I just work it out. And then like a couple hours later, I was reading somewhere something about riding hard, something that paralleled it. I was like, what? That's like a coincidence. And it happens to me quite often that I'll be reading in one magazine something, and then I go open up my scriptures and I get the exact same words. And I'm like, that is a witness. They're a witness to each other that is truth. So whenever the words match up coincidentally, I really pay attention and say, okay, what does this mean for me right now? Then the second way a coincidence can work is that sometimes I'm praying for an answer and I'll open up the scriptures, sometimes just randomly, but sometimes it's exactly as I've been going along, chapter to chapter, and I am able to have the answer that I want. And I think, how did that happen? Because I didn't read last Saturday. And how is my reading schedule up exactly so that I could find this thing right now, today? How did that coincidence happen that I found that answer today, despite my reading not necessarily religiously? And to be able to find that I get an answer on a particular day, for example. Okay, so here are my beloved scriptures, and I love them so much because I made them mine. This is a quad scripture. It's really fat. It's got big writing because my eyes are starting to get old, and I have some awards that I received when I was a teenager, and I have this little backing little red fabric that I just love. And so this is a fat scripture, and I just love these, and I open them every single day. And I'm going to tell you about one scripture that I ran upon. And it came upon a time where I was wanting to do some musical meditations, because I had listened to someone else do scriptural musical meditations, and I wanted to write the music and put the words to the scriptures to the music. And I thought that'd be so fun. So then I was like, but is that the right use of my time? Is that what God would really have me do? I don't know. Maybe I'm just being selfish. Maybe it's just something I want to do. And maybe I want the notoriety of other people to see what I'm doing. Maybe I'm doing this for the wrong reason. So I sat down and I was reading in the Bible, the Old Testament. And I said, God, is it okay if I write some meditations? Because I want to have his say. I want to know if I'm spending my time the right way. And my jaw dropped as I read this in the first chapter of the book of Joshua, verse 8. This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. Have I not commanded thee? Be strong and of a good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. I was like, okay, I'll take that as a yes. So I created like 10 scriptural meditations, put to the music that I wrote, and I loved it. It was a great experience, and I'm really happy that I had that answer, that direct answer. How often do you think you're going to find meditate in your scriptural reading for that day? But I did. So have you had experiences with scriptures? What other ways would you add that you receive answers that I haven't talked about today? Will you look for answers more in your scriptures? How will you more look for answers? Because I believe that God will answer your questions when you are seriously and intentionally looking for them. So if you like to talk about self-care, which I would say finding answers to the scriptures is, you might enjoy my online program that is a 91-day app-based program about how to be all around healthier, from your body to your mind to, like we've been talking about, self-care. And you can go to www.honeydewhealthin91.com to find out more.